Atheist Nomads, episode 340, An Atheist at the Iowa Caucus.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and Lauren's surgery went well. She's recovering. She's pretty annoyed at some of it, but the pain's going down, and she's recovering, and we'll be getting the splints out here on Friday. So it's all looking pretty good, and we'll see how much this helps with her breathing. But fingers crossed that it should be good. We still don't know how much the bill is going to be because this is the American healthcare system, and it's all a guess until the insurance company finally does their thing. And everybody who's touched the patient or anything that ever was a part of the patient or anything that ever touched the patient has sent in their own bills because, again, this is the American healthcare system. It's not a system. It's a clusterfuck. But that's not what we're talking about this week. This week we have an interview with Justin Scott, and we might as well just get right into that. We are now joined by Justin Scott, the Iowa State Director for American Atheists. Justin, welcome to Atheist Nomads.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is pretty awesome.
So you're in Iowa right now.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It means at least you have a voice. Important thing.
I'm listening to one of the podcasts I listen to is Pod Save America.
Sure.
And yeah, they're political pundits with, lots of campaign experience and all of that. And the way they talk about Iowa, that'd have to be like a terrifying place to be right now, where you're getting clamored by everybody.
Not only that, but now our 2020 legislative session has kicked off. So you have the chaos of the presidential election, but you also now have a Republican trifecta down in Des Moines, where we're only 3 days in, and the assault on religious freedom and the assault on women's reproductive rights has already started. And so it's like, you want to talk about a circus.
Yeah.
That is the best word I could use to describe it. Pretty much. Line up
one
the
clown after another.
Yep.
All right. So I'm sure that with your position as basically the representative of one of the largest atheist organizations in the country for the state of Iowa, you're probably pretty busy.
I try to be. It's every day is different.
Hopefully you've got other people working for you too.
Yeah. And, that's the exciting part, is that we have a great collection of both activists, but also just regular Iowans that really, give a crap. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but they really, truthfully, they give a shit about their state. They give a shit about religious freedom. They give a shit about women's rights. And it's fun because you'll have people that have never done activism before all of a sudden coming into our groups and coming into, Facebook messages saying, "Oh, hell yeah, look what I just did." And
That's awesome. And look what I made.
And it's truly inspiring because here in Iowa, you don't need a title to go kick ass. And I think that when I have the opportunity to talk about what we're doing here, that's what I really want to try to sell is you don't have to have a title or any kind of experience to go out and do this stuff. That's the best part about all of this.
All right. So for people who aren't paying attention to the news, what's going on in Iowa right now?
Shitstorm.
Yeah. So basically you have a mix of people running to be the Democratic nominee for president. You also have a sprinkling of a few Republicans. You also have a few libertarians. I don't come across those too often, but essentially they are whoring themselves. They are knocking on doors and they are trying to grab our attention. They're trying to get our vote. February 3rd, we have what's called a caucus. And during the caucus, we get to stand in very awkward corners with awkward groups of neighbors that we usually probably don't talk to, and, you know, show our support for certain candidates.
God, we went to the Bernie Sanders one here in Boise, and it was exactly that. It was awkwardly standing around for like 8 hours, except realizing that it was all going to go to Hillary anyway.
Ours was actually, most of Idaho's delegates went to Bernie, but our caucus had the distinction of being the largest caucus in the history of the United States.
Oh, wow.
2,000 people. There was a line a mile long to get in.
But see, don't you think that's great? I mean, you hear so much. You hear so much about how us Americans don't give a shit about politics, and yet you hear stories like that, and it's like, well, I don't think that's true. I think we do care. Some of us.
Yeah. No, it ended up being
most of us.
It ended up being enough that
most of us.
The Idaho Democratic Party has moved on to primaries now.
Sure.
That was once you had a 20,000 person caucus, that's done.
And I can see the advantages of both sides. You know, the biggest thing we're talking about here in Iowa is, number one, does the state of Iowa really represent the country? Let's be frank, it doesn't. It doesn't. But as an Iowan, like, do you think I'm going to be on the front line saying, no, please take this away from us and let some other state be number one? I mean, that'd be stupid for me to say that.
Right. And
I mean, politically it makes sense. But as an activist who's really built my name and my reputation on this circus, for any other better word, keep it coming.
Right. And the candidates are all trying to get as many people to side with them in the caucus as possible so that they can get some of the first pledged delegates.
Absolutely. And to try to build, you know, the so-called thing of momentum. Some people argue that momentum doesn't exist. What is it? Is it tangible? So yeah, anyway, just to kind of go back to make sure for the listeners that have no clue what this is, literally you show up on one night and you walk in and you make sure that you're registered to vote. And they say, okay, you're like, let's say that's a gymnasium at a school. They'll say, okay, go find your corner, and you'll just see various groups of people just kind of hanging out. And if you don't mind me sharing, in 2008, I won't go as far as telling you who I supported because I don't feel like that's relevant. I want to stay nonpartisan. I just want to kind of lay it out there. But this was before I really tried to grab this caucus by the balls, basically. I kind of had my foot in atheist activism, but I was still kind of an activist in politics, if you will. I supported a candidate that at many caucuses ended up not being viable. And so this viability threshold they talk about is 15% of how many people are there. Right. So if you suck at math, don't be a precinct captain. You know, like if math is not your strong suit, just show up and support somebody and leave it at that. Let the smarter people in the room handle it. But it was very awkward because I had what I thought was a good group of people. You know, we had some young, some old, whatever. And all of a sudden they said, okay, those of you that are not at 15%, you need to realign. And I'm not giving out too much, but basically Barack Obama, when they talk about he inspired a movement, I mean, they're not kidding, because it was like half the town was on the other side of the gymnasium. God, I remember sitting there watching each county turn blue. Yeah. That was epic. It was amazing. And it was one of the greatest nights of politics I've ever been a part of. But anyway, all of these people, basically at that point, you have three choices. You can either get up and go somewhere else. You can be stubborn and kind of dig your heels in and say, no, this is my candidate, I'm staying here. Or you can just walk out and go home. I wish we had walked out and gone home. And there's a part of me, as a political junkie that's like, why would you want to do that? Like, you've already invested, all this time and energy. You probably got like an amazing parking spot. Like, why would you want to go home? Like, watch the circus, So
one of the funny things with the Boise 2016 one was that they told us after they were still processing people through. They were running into the risk of having the fire marshal shut it down because people were blocking all the fire escapes. because there weren't enough Bernie Sanders seats. And they reached the point where they finally let us all know that, oh yeah, your vote was counted when you registered.
Sure.
There is no need to stay.
You didn't,
Sure.
They didn't tell us that until 4 or 5 hours in?
We got there around 5 and they told us around 10.
We did not get out till after midnight.
Yeah.
You know, and
but we did leave right after they told us that, so it would have been closer to midnight.
No, you did.
Oh,
I stayed.
did. I ditched at 10.
Yeah. I stayed till midnight.
And I just want to go on record as saying people that volunteer to run these things, like, my hat's off to these folks.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it's not an easy job. It's not a job that anybody wants to do. So, like, I can empathize with y'all.
Right. But the Iowa caucuses
you want to piss in. Yeah, go ahead.
The Iowa caucuses have the money to really do it well, where by the end, your vote is being counted for a candidate that will get delegates.
I hope so. Like, I don't want to trash the IDP because I'm trusting that that's what happens. And I don't want to get too nerdy here, but they did make a change for this caucus that I think will be very interesting. And if we can kind of nerd out for a second, I think this is interesting for your listeners to hear. So I've only taken part in 2 caucuses. And if I remember correctly, the idea was you would just keep realigning until all of the non-viables were out. What they're doing this year is, as soon as you get there and you show up to your corner, they're going to do a head count. And then that number gets sent off to the state.
Oh.
They're going to do one realignment after that. They're going to report that number. So here's the thing they're talking about in Iowa that I don't think they're talking about nationwide. We could technically have reports of 2 winners from that night.
Yeah.
Because you could essentially have the winner that brings in the most people through the door first.
Uh-huh.
But you could also have this person that then gets to say, yeah, but you know what? I'm the consensus builder because I'm the one that brought in the most number 2s, which then if you're one of those party loyalists that say, oh, we need who's going to bring in, the party together. We need to look at this candidate. So it's going to be very interesting. And then the thing I've always noticed in my whole whopping 2 times doing this is that who finishes number 3? That's a dark horse candidate. That's the candidate that, could come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Be polling at 1% leading up to it. And all of a sudden finishes 3rd. And you're like, where the hell was this at? But if I can be critical of Iowa, I wanted to finish my second point from earlier. Number 1, we don't represent America. That's painfully obvious. Most of our state's white, most of our state's Christian, a lot of it's old. But number 2,
and corny.
It's very
yeah, I had to. Come on, somebody had to make the corn joke.
Where's the rim shot sound?
I've driven through Iowa twice.
Sure.
And I think I stopped for lunch both times.
Do you remember the city?
I think it was around Des Moines.
Was it a cornfield?
Did you stop at a cornfield?
No, I did not.
And had corn from a truck on the side of the cornfield?
No, but it was like I'd been at that point when I was heading out. It was headed to Michigan, and I had started out in Oregon. And driving through Iowa was like, this is a tiny state of farms.
Pretty much. Don't get me wrong. There's some really awesome cities across Iowa, but it's such a small spatial area.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get if you're doing 80, 90 miles an hour, you can get across the state pretty quick.
Yeah. Like I could have very easily not stopped in Iowa at all driving through.
Absolutely. The only other thing I was going to add is about the caucuses is that they disenfranchise a ton of voters. You've got people that are parents, you've got single parents, you've got families where grandparents are taking care of kids. You've got third shift workers that can't make it. You've got disabled, low income. You've got college students that have night classes. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention, but the Iowa Democratic Party had the opportunity. And by all means, if your listeners know more about this, correct me where I'm wrong. But they were considering like I don't want to say absentee, but it was like an online. You could check in. You could check in online, and they decided against it, which
they probably couldn't secure it.
Yeah. So I don't know, and I don't know what the answer is. Switching to a primary, switching to a day off, doing an all-day thing, doing several different alignments during the day so that you can get different people. I don't know what the answer is. And I almost kind of wonder if I almost think it's one of those things where the tradition of it is what keeps it relevant more so than the success of it or the true value of it.
Right. Because if Iowa switched to a primary, it would be, I think you would see the candidate attention be cut in half because primaries aren't showy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's not the big showboating, but you're right about the disenfranchisement. Whatever.
Yeah.
People. Yeah, it doesn't represent anybody except for rich white people.
Right. When you're dealing with a state that only has 3 million people, basically there's maybe 5 to 10 cities that if you did a primary, you just focus on those 5 to 10 cities and you're golden.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would just be a process of simple mathematics where if you can just get a certain chunk of these cities, you're good. I guess the one beauty about the caucus is that every single precinct matters. Every single little BFE part of, Northeast Iowa is so vital because that one little town where only 10 people show up could be that one extra delegate at the convention that gets to cast a vote in your favor. So that's where they're desperate to have. I mean, I've had organizers for many different campaigns say, oh my goodness, you live in a town of 1,800 people. There might only be 20 people at your caucus, especially in an area like the town I live in. 85% of the town voted for Trump in 2016. So you're talking of very slim margins where even earning like 2 or 3 delegates could be just huge.
Yeah. And when like people, there are people who claim that the Electoral College gives more power to rural areas when it doesn't. It gives power to swing states and cities in swing states specifically. But
population centers.
Iowa Caucus is the one spot where rural voters actually matter.
Absolutely. And we saw it in 2016. And I'm not I can't think what they call them, like the telestrator politic person. I'm not
pundit.
I'm not a pundit. There you go. I'm not Tim Russert. I'm just this random atheist that really enjoys this. But, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that in 2016, for right or wrong or indifferent, certain candidates in certain parties focused on the right voters with the right message. And I don't mean right as in the moral message.
Yeah.
But they focused in on those voters and stroked their egos and made them feel warm and fuzzy. And that was enough. That's all it took.
Yeah.
Yeah. If only somebody would do that for the non-believers. That'd be a huge chunk.
Absolutely. And we're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying.
What are you doing to try to get atheists a seat at the table?
Well, the simple answer is absolutely anything I can think of. I mean, at this point, I'm trying everything. I'm trying in-person events. I'm trying to badger Elizabeth Warren during her selfie line. I'm trying to use Twitter. I'm trying to use Facebook. I'm trying to use local private Facebook groups. I'm trying to use Facebook events. I'm trying to use an Instagram account. I've even gotten to the point where I've started tweeting campaign managers, just straight up, just being like, yo, why don't you talk to us? Like literally there is no like blueprint for what I'm doing.
You just have to keep throwing darts in the dark and just hope 1 out of 100 sticks.
Absolutely. And the problem is the fact that we're so close to the caucus, it seems like it would be a good thing because now these candidates are just like, I mean, I think I saw today Pete Buttigieg was in like 5 towns. It's like, how is that even possible? I mean, every town's like an hour in between one another.
It's only 3 hours to get across the entire state.
Yeah. There's
probably something you could call a town every 8 miles.
The old railroad, you know how they used to be on trains and
right. And then those random guys from Oregon trying to get across the state eating lunch in a field. Mm-hmm. But the problem is now that we're so close, we're hearing stories that they're not taking questions. We're hearing stories that they're not letting us bring signs in. So they're becoming more rally style events where there's not a Q&A and it's not as up close and personal. And then also, let's be frank, no offense to the certain candidates that I'm going to name, but if we're going to go out to an event and we're going to sit through an hour-long campaign speech, do you really want to waste your time on the people polling at 1%?
Right.
Is that worth your time? And it's this like, pick your poison. Mm-hmm. You either go to a front runners event. You have to sit way in the back. They don't take questions. So then you're standing there going, well, what the fuck did I come to this for? Or you go to the 1% event. There's 7 people. 5 of them are working security. One of them's the janitor. and it wouldn't have mattered if you went up and punched him in the face. Nobody would care. I mean, it's just, that's what we're dealing with. And so let me switch focus here for a second. I hope your listenership reaches to New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina.
Calling you out.
Seriously, I'm putting y'all on notice. I've officially put y'all on notice right now.
Okay, we have, looking at an episode that went out a month ago, we had 3 downloads from Iowa.
Sure.
And let me get back into the stats because I actually closed that. I wanted to make sure that we actually did have recent downloads in Iowa, and we have.
Good.
So
there is more to the state than corn.
Yeah.
Okay, back in the U.S.
While you look that up, let me just make my pitch.
1 in New Hampshire.
1 in New Hampshire, okay.
5 in South Carolina.
Oh, very good.
Wow.
What was the other one you said?
Nevada.
Nevada, 7.
Yeah. Intermountain region.
So basically, these candidates are going to make a letter Z across the country. So they're going to go from Iowa up to New Hampshire, over to Nevada, and then back over to South Carolina. It's our time, folks. If you're listening and you're in one of those states, it is now time to put up or shut up, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've done as much as we can possibly do here in Iowa. It's getting to the point, and I might be a little biased here, but I think these candidates are starting to recognize me. I mean, literally,
you're on a list.
Literally, I was avoided at an event. Raised my hand, tried to get called, went up to the fence line to talk to the candidate, and they flat out just like walked past me and like, come on, I make enough commotion. You know who I am. So that's the thing. For that 1 person in New Hampshire and the 5 people in South Carolina, this is your moment to shine, folks. This is your moment to be that random atheist in the crowd that says, hey, I've got a question. Yeah, hi. I was born and raised here. I'm also an atheist. Why should I vote for you? Because that local media, especially in South Carolina, is not ready for that. And so if I can just cut to the chase, like I will give the folks here all my contact info. If you want to do this and you're up for it and you want to make a difference, let me know and I will guide you through this. We can do a personal video chat where I guide you through how do you go to an event and get attention, because that may be the thing that inspires the next atheist to go and do it. And that might inspire the next religious person to say, you know what? I hate that you're an atheist, but I love your question. And I've wondered the same thing.
And I would say with South Carolina in particular, if you're listening and you're Black, definitely speak up, because that's where the candidates are going to see if they're viable with black voters.
Absolutely.
And they all think that black people are all Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
And that needs to be corrected.
If you look in the news right now, there is a story about how Pete Buttigieg, I'm not picking on him, I'm nonpartisan, I'm not here to rail on candidates, I'm here to talk strategy. But apparently the Buttigieg campaign has spent, I think, $1 million on religiously themed advertising specifically for South Carolina.
Yep.
So
because they assume.
I want somebody in South Carolina to literally rip off this line of questioning. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Hey, Pete, I live in South Carolina and I'm an atheist. I've watched your commercials. You talk a lot about Jesus and how you love God. That's great. More power to you. Makes me wonder, though, what are you going to do for our country? Are you running to be commander-in-chief or pastor-in-chief?
Nice.
And then just stand there. Now, don't get me wrong. Is it a policy-driven question? No. Is it kind of a gotcha question? Absolutely. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to start a conversation, and it's going to create a ripple that's going to be felt across that state.
Today is National Religious Freedom Day.
Yeah.
Religious Freedom Day. Absolutely.
As of recording.
Yeah, as of recording, Trump signed something that's supposed to bolster student rights to pray in school. Use that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I'll say that that students have a right to pray. They just can't be led by faculty or, it doesn't. Why do this extra step when it excludes a whole chunk of the population?
And for Nevada, if you're one of our 7 listeners there and you're Latino, that's where they're going to test how they can do with Latinos.
Absolutely.
So definitely speak up.
And with Latinos too, I had a chance to ask Julian Castro a question specifically about Hispanic and Latino atheists. I said, there is a stereotype that all Latino and Hispanics are religious, that they're all Christian, and they're all Catholic. And he just hit it out of the park. He said, you know what? First off, I don't see atheism as a bad word. And my jaw just dropped. My jaw dropped, and I thought, oh my God. I'm an atheist, and all of a sudden the heavens opened up. Like, what is this? I was like, who's this dude? And where have you been? But he basically said, listen, I think we need to bring everybody together, and it doesn't matter what stereotype you don't fit to. And I just think, sometimes you got to be creative with your line of questioning. Don't get me wrong. If you're an atheist out there and your first thought is, well, I'm going to ask about church-state separation. Hey, high five, good job. I appreciate you wanting to do that. But I want you to understand the pitfalls of a huge question like that. It sounds great. Hey, I went out and I did this and I asked them about church-state separation. But that is such a huge concept.
It's complicated.
That's like asking about space travel. What are your thoughts on space travel? I mean, where do you want me to start? Mm-hmm. But you got to be very specific. So you brought up religious freedom and Trump. So, instead of just asking about these 30,000-foot questions, maybe you pinpoint it and you say, listen, the Trump administration wants to make it so that Christians can discriminate against atheists. And then when atheists try to sue, we have no legal standing, or the courts are going to ignore us, or there won't be money with the IRS to fight some of these things. Will you work to make sure that funding is put back together? Maybe the question is, like I've been asking a couple candidates, will you require churches to fill out the same financial disclosure forms that all other nonprofits have to fill out?
Yeah. That's a simple first step. Just do that.
For what it's worth, Pete Buttigieg kind of shrugged me off. I don't know if you saw the headlines recently where he basically said, no, I see churches as being different. It's different. What the hell are you talking about different? So again, this is not this question is really bad and you suck if you ask it. This is listen, we've already done some of these. If you really are going to do this, let's take full advantage of it. Find me on Facebook, find me on Twitter. Let's really strategize and let's have a national plan for this.
What you need is a really cute mascot. You need a little dog that you can take with you to rallies.
Right. Or a rubber dog with a stogie in his mouth.
Mr. Pepito has a question for you.
What was that
Puddles,
back in like the...
Puddles has something to say.
Was it like the late 90s or early 2000s, that rubber dog that had the cigarette or stogie in his mouth?
Triumph.
It was
Triumph.
And he was really raunchy and...
He was awful. But yes, something like that.
Yeah.
But see, think about that. Is that where our politics are? That in order for atheists to get any attention, we have to even think that way?
Yes.
Like from a marketing standpoint,
I like to put dogs on everything.
Idea.
Now, I would actually say that this is incredibly disappointing that you haven't gotten any attention, because all of the candidates are hitting Iowa.
Yep.
They're vying for every vote they can get, and they know that the single demographic that Democrats do the best in is atheists. You would think it'd be smart for them to try to win over the atheists.
Every minority thinks that, but
yeah, but
it's frustrating.
When you look at
it's a problem.
Atheists specifically, but non-religious people in general are a huge chunk of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
The largest minority in the Democratic Party.
I think it's because Republicans have been beating the dead horse for so long, saying that they need to have the Christian vote, that has distracted the Democrats into thinking, oh, well, we need it too. It's like, no, you don't.
Lauren, you bring up a good point. I watch too much cable news, and I remember Nancy Pelosi going on Morning Joe maybe like a year or two ago, and she made a very disturbing comment. And she said, the Republicans keep winning because they keep wearing their religion on their sleeve, and maybe that's what us Democrats need to start doing.
I think I remember that.
I remember I think they were in like a bar or a coffee shop, and I remember I went to Twitter and I just exploded, and I was like, you have got to be shitting me.
I could just see you cracking your knuckles. You're like, all right, let's do this.
It's like the
block
whole
out the next 12 hours.
Yeah, it's like the dramatic neck crack.
Yep. Twitter bomb.
But that's the thing. And there's this idea that positioning yourself as the candidate for the progressive left Christian is the safe spot. That's the sweet spot right now. If you can be the candidate for the progressive religious left, that's where the money is.
Okay, so you target the Congregationalists, the group that split off from the UU, or when the UU formed, the group that stayed Christian, that are almost as liberal as the Unitarians.
Yeah,
would be the sweet spot.
Yep.
Plus, they have money. Oh well, UU tends to. But yeah, I would love to see somebody just say, "Meh, we don't need it. You guys can have them. We'll take all these people instead."
But okay, so recently Cory Booker dropped out. I had a chance to talk to Cory after one of his early events. Very charismatic guy, just wonderful to talk to. But all he could give me was this canned response that he uses over and over and over again about, I'd rather be around a friendly atheist than a mean Christian.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the backhanded compliment. Why can't you just say I enjoy atheists? Why does there have to be the tag? Why do you have to tag on the Christian part?
Oh, he said that to you several months ago. We played the clip of him saying that on TV.
Sure.
Yeah, because he was pandering.
And he keeps saying it.
Yeah. I remember the first time he said it, that was a big deal. And then he kept saying it over. And it was such a big deal that I think, he kind of fell back on that a little too much. But you could just say, hey, religion has nothing to do with it.
Right. And I think it just boils down, especially in Iowa, and this could change over the next couple of weeks or months. I don't see it changing, but there is such an older vote here that is so reliable that I don't think they feel the need. The urgency isn't there for them to change up the strategy. And since we don't go out, the exit polling doesn't show 60% of atheists said they voted this way. I mean, most people won't even tell you that they're an atheist, let alone tell you who they voted for. And so for these strategists, we're not even on their radar. And so just because some loudmouth bearded atheist starts yakking about it, I mean, that's not enough. And until this happens on a national level where, like, don't get me wrong, we have the Free Thought Caucus now in Congress. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Shout out to everybody that put that together. But until we start to come out in droves, and I'm not saying we all have to vote the same way. Hell, I've been trying to push conservative atheists to start infiltrating their local Republican county parties just to rile things up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so for me personally, I'll share a little bit about myself. Like, I'm not a gun hater, but I'm not a gun lover. I don't run to Shields or whatever the local gun store is to stock up on the latest assault rifles. Yeah, go to Mount Walmart. But, here's the thing. I can tuck aside that conversation with a conservative atheist to have a very productive conversation about, there's a huge opportunity for you to go into this local party and say, okay, what the F with all the religious shit? Like, is this a county party meeting or is this a revival? Like, is this the extra scene on Jesus Camp that they don't show? Like, seriously.
No, we know somebody locally who did exactly that. He's a conservative. He's retired Army, and he got into not just getting elected to the Republican precinct, but became the precinct committee chairman. He got onto the city council. He became city council president while driving around Mountain Home, Idaho with atheist license plate.
That's badass.
Because when it comes down to it, most people just don't care.
Right.
But people need to prove that first.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, too, goes back to you just do you and I'll do me. And as long as you don't bother me, I'm good with it.
So do you have a future in politics?
There better not be. I get asked that a lot. I get told, you should run for school board. You should run for mayor. You should. I don't know. I really enjoy being the activist. I really enjoy, going and trying to change things.
That's a great excuse. No, I'm too much of an activist.
Yeah.
Because in politics, you don't go into politics to make change. Compromise, maybe, but not change.
Right.
Activists are like, no, things need to change.
Right. Exactly. So if you don't mind me going back to that really quick.
Yeah.
I really think there's an opportunity. Maybe Idaho's the same way, but maybe not. With Iowa, we can affect the state party platform on the night of the caucus with things called planks. Now, don't get the wrong idea. We don't all just hit the floor and start, doing planks. That would be kind of fun to see. But
early 2000s planking.
Right. But no, literally, you just you look at their platform and you find things that you don't like on it or things that you want to see changed, and you submit a piece of paper, and if they get enough of them, they take it up to the state party, and the state party considers it, and they could change it. I was successful at a county level caucus a couple of years ago. There was a part about we will support any candidate no matter their, and then it went, race, gender, and then it said religion, and I got them to add or lack thereof.
Oh, nice.
And so that was a small change, but again, going back to the conservative atheist argument, imagine if on caucus night we had a bunch of conservative atheists that went into their party, filled out these plank forms, and said, okay, first off, our rights don't come from God, so we need to change that. You imagine a conservative atheist submitting 50 planks to get those changed.
Oh, yeah.
One of them's bound to go through.
Well, and I think you had said earlier, all of a sudden other people hear it and they go, well, wait a minute, I agree with you. Why haven't we talked about this before?
Mm-hmm.
And the only other thing I was going to add is in 2016, I had so much success. I caught the attention of American Atheists. They ended up putting a table on at CPAC out by DC.
Mm-hmm.
This is a super conservative event. And what I noticed was while every 40-year-old on up would avoid us like the plague. Holy crap, the 35-year-olds and under, like, they ran to us. I mean, they were just like, oh my God, atheists are here. What the hell are you doing here? This is amazing.
What rock did you crawl out from?
Yeah, and if anybody's interested, go onto YouTube and type in, I think it's called Full Frontal with Samantha Bee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, make sure you put the Samantha Bee part, because Full Frontal could really bring some bad results. But type in atheists at CPAC, and they did a segment on us. And there's a clip in the middle where there's a young woman, probably in her late, probably teens, maybe 20s, that comes on camera and says, oh my goodness, I think it's great that they're here. It's wonderful. And I think even the most liberal atheist out there needs to keep that in mind. Like, listen, there is an opportunity out here to work with our conservative allies to get things changed from within.
Right, because if you agree on 95% of something, don't let the 5% ruin it.
And don't get me wrong, I've taken a beating here locally because I've tried to go and influence Republican politics. And I've heard from some liberal friends that are saying, you're wasting your time. These people, and it's a lot of partisan bickering about they hate gays and they want to take away rights. And don't get me wrong, there's some out there that definitely do want to do that. But why not at least take a shot at this? Why not at least talk to your conservative leaders and say, hey, what are you guys doing to appeal to atheist voters? I mean, are you trying to actually bring us to the party at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
It's a bold idea. I mean, it's hard enough saying you're an atheist amongst like-minded folks.
Well, and I think have the same effect as the reason why Democrats, I believe the reason why Democrats ignore atheists is they're afraid of losing more Christians.
Right.
And
as I roll my eyes.
For Republicans, they don't need to worry about losing Christians. They've got them. They've got all the conservative Christians. So if they could gain non-believers, that would be, I think they'd have more of a win there.
It'd be very interesting because it would threaten the privilege that Christianity and religion in general has had in their party for so long. And I'm not going to toot the horn of parties specifically, but I will say this, at least in Iowa, the libertarians have actually treated me with a ton more respect than the conservatives and the Republicans. And straight up, a libertarian candidate for governor, like, looked me in the eye and straight up told me, like, dude, I don't give two shits about your atheism. Like, at the end of the day, we're the party of freedom. And don't get me wrong, I see many issues with a libertarian approach, but that being said, we're connected on social media. Every time I reach out, they're ready for, to provide an answer. And the critic in the room saying, well, of course, they're not a relevant party, so they're desperate for attention.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I don't care. I'm looking for people that are willing to hear me out and act on something. And so for what it's worth, the Iowa libertarians have been actually kind of refreshingly interested in what we have to say. And I think it'll be very interesting to see, how there's debates all the time about, it was the Republicans that ended slavery. And then there's the counter that's like, well, yeah, but the parties ended up switching their platforms a couple of years later. So essentially they were the Democrats back then. It makes you wonder if religion finally leaves the Republican Party, if this obsession with Christianity and Christian conservatism finally gets weeded out. I hate to say it this way, but if the plug finally gets pulled on that, just simply because that older generation just dies off, what will it mean for the Republican Party when they stop giving a shit what people do in their bedrooms, when they stop trying to legislate morality from the pages of their Bible, and they just get back to the core principles of conservatism? I'd much rather have a discussion or a debate with a conservative on the merits of capitalism versus socialism over, well, my God says this. Okay, but I don't give a shit about what your God says. I want to talk politics. No, well, but my God said, I don't give a fuck what your God says.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just talk? Can we just talk about income tax rates and like
economic policies.
I guarantee, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's more that we agree on than they realize, but they just get so hung up on the God part.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that will be really interesting to see what happens with the way the modern political conservative identity has gotten so caught up on the wedge issues.
Right.
And created the wedge issues. Those were intentionally created by Jerry Falwell and the early religious right to try to create a very specific form of Christianity and get it political power.
Right.
And it'll be fascinating to see what happens when that literally dies. So
I'm only 38. I haven't really been in politics for that intensely for so long. But doesn't it just feel way different than, say, like Bush, Gore, 2000?
Yeah.
In the sense of like, and I don't want to get too crazy and deep here, but it's like we have 4 Democratic parties and we have 4 Republican parties.
Yeah.
I saw a comment the other day that AOC had said that any other place, her and Joe Biden wouldn't be in the same party.
Yeah.
And that's so fascinating to think about.
Well, heck, in 40 years ago, she and Joe Biden would not have been in the same party.
Absolutely. Yep. And then it just makes me curious which slice of pie in that 4 versus 4 wins out. Because even on the Republican side, you have old school Republicans, you have Tea Party Republicans, which do they even exist anymore? Like, did they crawl back in their holes yet? I mean,
no,
they turned.
They're the House Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, they just changed.
So they still have control of the House of Representatives. Well, recently had control of the House of Representatives.
But like, then you also could argue there's now the party of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see, even in the next 10 years, when we look back, how these parties shift. And by goodness, could we end up with a third party eventually?
We would need much more fundamental changes to how American democracy works to have a viable third party.
Right.
Otherwise, what we'd probably end up having would be a single presidential year where there actually is a viable third party, and then the parties reshuffle.
Sure.
It's been about 50 years since the last big reshuffling, and they seem to happen roughly every 50 years.
We're overdue.
Or just do.
I'll make some random, like, uneducated comment, but why is it that we can literally go in, decimate a country, totally wipe it off the map, and then build it back up, and within a week, they have, like, 75 candidates from 250 different parties? Maybe my math didn't work out there, and then they'll get, like, 97% turnout.
That's because when we rebuild a country, we let the UN help set up the government, and the UN sets up modern democracies.
Right.
And we have a democracy from before there was even such a concept as political parties.
Yep.
The concept of left and right.
I just always find that.
Yeah. Left and right.
I always find that interesting.
Left and right came about after the Constitution was ratified, and the parties formed after George Washington. And modern democracies don't have those issues.
Yeah, we need to be like New Zealand.
I'm sure at this point now your listeners are going, holy shit, where did we get off? Where did we exit from Iowa Caucus land and all of a sudden end up in socio-political international affairs?
Not to mention it's late at night. So
yeah.
Well, okay, so how that all ties in together is the Iowa Caucus is where you're trying to pick who next is in control of the socio-political socio-political global affairs, or whatever it was we just said.
Yes.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, it all ties in,
right?
And yeah, realistically, if you look at the candidates that we have running right now, there is huge differences between them. It's crazy. They're all on the same stage for the debates.
Absolutely. But I also think from the atheist activist point of view and church state separation point of view, that provides us so much opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because okay, let's take a moment and venture away from being single issue voters. I had my chops busted the other day by a local activist friend that said, single issue activism is a waste of time, blah, 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 blah. We need to fight the system. Okay, fine. You know what? Let's do it. There are so many other issues we could talk about. With Tom Steyer, I asked him, he's a big climate change person. I went up to him and I said, listen, that's fine that you want to build this coalition. That's fine that you think you can get government around you and big business around you. But what are you going to do when the religious right gathers their resources and says, fuck you, second coming's coming. Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit. My God has this under control. What are you going to do about that? And, not a tip of the hat to Tom. He literally said, without batting an eye, he's like, yeah, that's troubling. He's like, when you tell us that you're talking to your God, that usually means there can be no compromise. And so the gist that I got from him is there's going to have to be a moment where a president basically just ignores the religious right and just works their way around them. But it's questions like that of mixing what upsets us about religion and government, but then tries to tie it back to some other issue. So one of the big issues that is very important to Nick Fish, president of American Atheists, is adoption. And if you follow him on Twitter or you've been paying attention to what's been going on in New Jersey, it's just a whole mess out there. And recently, especially with what Lauren said about today with the religious freedom with Trump, mm-hmm. you're seeing this idea that I think it was in Tennessee where they don't have to adopt out to LGBT parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they what is that discriminate against? And right, who does that harm? The kids.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what we've seen with these adoption rules is like I think it was one of the Carolinas recently had to crack down on one of the agencies because they weren't just discriminating against LGBT couples or atheists. They were discriminating against Jews and Catholics, and
it was Christian. It was Christian on Christian. Too. Right. It was Christian on Christian discrimination. Absolutely.
And that got him in trouble.
And rightfully so. And when you follow, just keep going down. So you're talking about adoption, and then you're talking about daycares, and then all of a sudden you start talking about children. Well, then vaccinations mm-hmm. and religious exemptions. And it's like, seriously, you could lay out the top 20 issues that get asked at the debates. They all, in some way, go back to either church-state separation, the power and corruption and influence of the religious right, our federal government and our state governments rolling out the red carpet to all of it. So if there's an atheist activist out there, or even just a regular Joe or Jane activist sitting there going, I don't know what I could ask. Like, what are you talking about? There's so much we could talk about.
Yeah.
Almost an entire podcast full.
Right. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We're almost to the hour. So we're doing awesome. Great.
Yeah. So basically, I just want to kind of take control now and just say, listen, we've got Iowa coming up February 3rd, followed by New Hampshire, followed by Nevada, followed by South Carolina. After those 4 states are done, you're going to run into what's called Super Tuesday. Mm-hmm. By Super Tuesday, that's where you're going to see the field start to dwindle down. That's where the events are going to turn from, oh, come kiss my baby, come to this coffee shop, to, okay, now it's on. Now it's giant rallies. Yeah, good luck getting a question with these folks.
Yeah.
So seriously, if you have the opportunity to hit up one of those 4 states, I mean, hell, if you're in Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and you're looking for something fun to do, hit me up and let's road trip to one of these. I'd love to meet some of your listeners, and we could sit on opposite sides of a Mayor Pete event, and we could yell out, churches aren't special, Pete. That's cool.
I love it.
That's cool. That's cool that you're religious. There's other people that aren't.
Yeah. And yeah, in those early states, because like realistically, candidates who don't even have, if they haven't gotten any delegates by the end of by the time South Carolina's done, they're probably going to be dropping out.
I mean, unless you're Michael Bloomberg and you're spending $400 billion on ads.
Just to spite the rest of the Democrats, I guess? Or the rich Republicans?
I think he spent that much on California.
I think I saw a graphic that Maddow had up where Pete and Bernie had spent $10 million on ads. Tom Steyer had spent $67 million on ads. And Bloomberg had spent $142 million.
Oh, wow.
And it's just ridiculous. Like, if you've ever watched the caucus, like, I get home and check the mail, and like my mailbox is completely full of ads. Today I got a handwritten postcard from Amy Klobuchar. I had another flyer from Tom Steyer. I mean, it's ridiculous. And like every other commercial is an ad for somebody. And now you're starting to see ads that are by super PACs. So they're not even by the candidate themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You got a handwritten postcard?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't from Amy, but it was from some of her supporters.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Desperate.
Oh, yeah. And like before that, I had a random survey. I probably get 5 to 10 political phone calls every day.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's entertaining.
And most sane people go, I don't want that.
Right. And I try to have fun with it because I've made those phone calls. So I used to be a supervisor in a call center. And so I'll pull the whole Karen role. I'll be like,
oh my God.
Okay, I'll be like, straight up, that was a great pitch, but your tone sucked a little bit. So next time, could you just at least sound like you're excited to be alive?
Beautiful.
But let's be frank. They're going through a call sheet. They'll probably call 50 people in their shift.
And they're probably exhausted, and they're probably overworked.
Right. So I try to have fun with it, and I always compliment them, and I tell them thanks for what they're doing. And the best are the old ladies. Oh my goodness, the best are the old ladies, because this might be the one time of the day where they get out and they get some social interaction, and they'll get like, "Oh, sweetheart, I went out and I voted when I was 18 back in 1942." Like
that's adorable.
Well, let me ask quick. What from an outsider perspective, like, what do you want to know about what it's like either going to an event or being an atheist at an event that maybe your listener is kind of wondering? Because I've been doing this for 4 years now. I think I've answered pretty much every question, but it's always fun to put it back on y'all and see if there's anything about this that maybe I didn't bring up that you're curious about.
Is there a way to present yourself that doesn't either cause people to avoid you or cause people to come up and maliciously confront you?
It's a good question.
Like, do you wear puffy vests to make yourself look softer?
Yeah,
this is where the little dog comes in handy.
I shave off my beard. No, so I go right to it. I go right to the jugular, but obviously I'm firebrand, so it doesn't bother me. But I could see where that would be an issue. So maybe one way to put it is, like many of the religious folks in the room, I don't feel it's right when religion gets used for bad reasons. So you haven't identified yourself as an atheist. You haven't put yourself out as non-religious. You have just said, like the religious people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Another way you could put it is, religion's really not my thing. Or you could say, going to church isn't really my thing, but... And if you're a former Christian or a former religious person, you could say, I grew up in the Lutheran church and I remember being taught blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a softer way of doing it. Now, I do challenge you to put out that you're an atheist as long as you're okay doing it. Like, I don't want anybody to not feel safe. I don't want you to,
absolutely. Yeah.
Come out to your family at a presidential rally.
Yeah.
Save that for Thanksgiving drama, people.
Yeah. you let's say you're a 19-year-old that's going to college and you live with your mom and dad, and you come home and they're like, so how was the Elizabeth Warren event? And you're like, I just told 900 people I'm an atheist. And they're like, what?
Record scratch.
Yeah. And they're like, we pay your tuition at Liberty University and you just told 900 people you're an atheist. What?
All right. So when you get those rehearsed dismissive answers like you got from Cory Booker, do you get to respond to those, to the response?
I make sure that I get to.
You do it.
So what was your comeback to Cory Booker politely dismissing you?
Yeah, so Cory Booker's probably not a good example because that was total chaos. That was like as the event was over and people were kind of like coming up to him and like, oh, Cory, over here, I want a selfie, blah, 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 blah. But I had been doing it enough where it starts to become, you can anticipate what's going to happen next. You know, the candidate turns and it's finally your moment. You tell him that story that you expect him to remember and he's just smiling at you. And you get him to answer the question. But as he finishes answering, you try to shift or pivot to something different to get like a whole new 2 minutes with him, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, and then you try to like pull off the whole, oh, look at this, my phone's not working. Hey, maybe you can help me. And then he's like, duh, dumbass, it's the camera button. Hey, do you want a selfie? You know, and then while he's taking the selfie, if you're not a fanboy or fangirl of him, you just start talking to him during the selfie. And I'm not kidding. So if you've watched, Elizabeth Warren likes to do a selfie line, and she literally will take a selfie with absolutely everybody in the room. And so I've gotten to the point now where she kind of knows me on a first name basis, and I'm not bragging. That's just because I've gone to so many of her events and I've made such an impact where now I come up and it's like, she's like, hey, Justin. And I go up to her and I'm like, hey, did you hear this story? And like we're acting like we're taking a selfie, but really I'm giving her intel. I'm telling her like, you know I only have these 2 minutes up on stage with you, but while I'm here, here's what I have on my mind. And at the last event I went to of hers, maybe like 3 weeks ago, was in Des Moines. I slipped her a business card with a note about the IRS or about the Mormon church scandal. And it basically said, talk about mega church corruption, look up LDS scandal. And after she got done talking to the media, I said, Elizabeth, and she comes over and I'm like, hey, I got something for you. Check this out. And she had no idea. She hadn't heard about it.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, which is pretty cool.
Well, they're so busy that news outside of the political arena is probably not getting to them.
Absolutely. And so, sorry, I got into the weeds, but you had asked, how do you redirect them? Yeah. So you just basically have to be prepared for bullshit. You have to be able. Joe Biden was a good one. Joe Biden likes to talk. Joe Biden will start to ramble on about what he did when he was in 8th grade.
Oh, God.
Yep. Growing up in Pennsylvania and raising a family in Delaware.
And my mom said to be scrappy, and boy, golly, I was scrappy.
Oh, man. Yep.
And so in those And so in those moments, you just have to, everything your parents taught you about being rude or being polite, you need to ignore, because you're there on a mission. You're there to get an answer. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen a lot of candidates do is when you bring up like, hey, how will you protect atheists as president? They'll say, well, I'm religious. Okay, Joe, I don't care. That's not what I asked. And the next thing they'll do is, well, that's what's great about this country is you have a right to be an atheist. Okay, Joe, I already know this. But the biggest thing is when they're done, they'll look at you and they'll say, okay, thanks for the question. And they'll immediately look and start pointing at somebody. You've got 2 seconds to say, Joe, you didn't answer my question.
Nice.
I mean, you literally just have to put it out there. Like, listen, that was unacceptable. I'm not satisfied. That's not what I want. And oftentimes just doing that will be enough to get the media to come up to you afterwards and be like, boy, you really didn't like his answer, did you? And then that gives you a chance to say, well, us in the atheist community, the single largest religious voting bloc, this is what we think. And we wanted to know why he wouldn't answer it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if this is not your cup of tea, don't get me wrong. There's other ways to make an impact. Don't feel like this is the only way to be really good at activism. I could probably give you 20 other things you could be doing to help out. But if you're listening to this and you're going, holy shit, I could do that. I could totally do that. Like, hit me up. Let's do this.
And especially in those early 4 states.
Short of throwing a cup of water at somebody or a water balloon.
Yeah. Don't do that.
What was it? Somebody threw a hot dog? No, pie. It was a pie. It wasn't.
I think it was an anti-LGBT woman, like back in, I think it was in Iowa. She got a pie in the face. But, and I appreciate the time to come on here and talk about this. And by all means, if the listeners out there listen to this podcast and go out and do something amazing, post about it and let people know you heard it here. You heard it on this show. That's what inspired you to do that, because, you two are going on a limb. Like, I was just some crazy dude on Twitter, that said, hey, let's talk about this. But there's a huge opportunity right now. And I challenge your listeners.
Tell everyone you know about our podcast.
Absolutely.
And when you get a tweet when you host an atheist podcast and you get a tweet from somebody with a @atheist.org email address, you usually humor them. That's just always been a good rule of thumb.
With at least like did you mean to tweet at me, or oh, wait a minute, you were trying to reach the other one. Okay, I get it. But no, you're hearing it here. Like, let's call it what, the Atheist Nomad Challenge, or I don't know.
Oh yeah, and if you're in one of those 4 early states and you are listening to this and you go to something, let us know. Definitely.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome to hear your stories.
And maybe let us know ahead of time. Let us make a big deal about it ahead of time. Maybe you mark something on the calendar that's a week from now, and not trying to plan your next show, but
yeah.
Because I'll tell you, I've been doing this long enough. I would love to be on the other side of this podcast, listening to some atheist out in Nevada that was listening one night, heard this discussion, and said, I'm going to go do that shit.
Yeah.
Pie at the ready.
Yeah. That's your backup plan. Just have a pie in your back pocket.
Fruit pie.
Alrighty. Well, we are out of time. Justin, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Justin Scott, pretty simple spelling, SCOTT. Scott's a pretty hard word to spell.
Only if you're a Starbucks barista.
Yeah. Profile photo is a cartoon of Uncle Sam pointing at you with an American Atheist logo in the corner. I'm on Twitter at Iowa Atheist 247. I was going to be cool and do 24/7, but Twitter wouldn't allow special characters. Yeah, sad face. But anyway, I'd say Twitter and Facebook are probably the 2 best ways. Otherwise, it's Justin Scott at atheist.org.
Cool.
All right.
Oh, you should have gone with 365.
Yeah, I thought about that as well. I should just make a new one. Iowa Atheist 247 365 pi.
Or real Iowa Atheists.
Oh yeah, real.
Or not.
Or go with the fake Iowa Atheists. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
not
right.
Iowa Atheists. Right.
Oh, I love it.
All right.
But no, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah. I really do. This is fantastic. I had a good time.
All right. And listeners, remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistnomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.